Hey guys, and welcome to the 10th installment of Updated Builds, a series of videos where I go back over warframes that I already made one or more videos about and I bring their builds up to date, because a lot of the build videos that I made for these warframes are very old and horrifically outdated. And today we're going to take a look at Nova, because her name has been popping up in the comments throughout the entire series. Now, even though I don't use Nova in my videos at all pretty much, it's very rare for me to use Nova when I'm recording footage. I actually use her quite a bit off camera. So today I want to share with you all the builds that I use on Nova, and I switch between them based on what I'm doing. So I have 3 builds for you today, and I think they're kind of like the standard mashup for Nova. So the first one focuses on the standard slowing version of Molecular Prime, the second one on the speed version of Molecular Prime, and the third one is mostly for speedrunning or farming Cetus Wisps. And let's start it off with the slow version of Molecular Prime. The ore I'm using here is Energy Siphon for some extra energy, because Molecular Prime is pretty expensive and you're pretty much going to be spamming it with this setup, so the extra energy is really nice. Though if you don't care about that, you can run something like Corrosive Projection. I'm then using Primed Continuity, Augur Message, and Narrow Minded, which gives me a ton of duration, so the wave lasts longer and thus expands further, and it also increases the duration of the Prime debuff. And Narrow Minded here is very important because it will kill our range, and I will talk about why that's important in a little bit. Then you kind of have an open mod slot. You can put whatever you want in here. I'm personally using Primed Flow because I like having a bigger energy bank to store energy. And for my defensive mod, I'm using Primed Vigor, which adds an absolutely ungodly amount of effective HP because of Null Star. Because Null Star, Nova's first ability, will summon small stars that will orbit around you, and each one of those stars will provide 5% damage reduction, which caps at 90%. This build has 13 of them. But there's a problem with that, because the Null Stars will randomly target enemies within a certain range and shoot off to them, doing damage and disappearing forever, so your damage reduction will constantly drain down. This is why we are reducing our range with Narrow Minded, to reduce the area in which these stars will target enemies, so you have to be really close to them for the stars to go off. But like it or not, it will happen anyway. You will slowly lose your stars throughout the mission, whether it is from melee enemies charging you or just you running too close to them. And this creates another problem, because you cannot recast Null Star while you already have stars orbiting around you. This is why we're using the Neutron Star Augment, which allows you to detonate the remaining stars, effectively working kind of like the Iron Skin Augment for Rhino, so whenever you start losing stars, you can just detonate them and recast them to get the full damage reduction. Then for a little bit of efficiency, I'm using Streamline to make our abilities a little bit cheaper, because we're going to be spamming Molecular Prime and Null Star as well, so we need some efficiency to keep our energy up, and we top it off with Transient Fortitude and Power Drift for some strength. Now I know some people would consider this to be too much strength because it goes over the cap of slow, which caps at 75%, but it also increases the explosion damage you get whenever you kill a primed enemy, which should not be underestimated. That explosion can do a ton of damage, especially if it chains. There is a reason why this build has been around for years at this point, and many people still use it. It is really strong. You have massive damage reduction from Null Star and Molecular Prime. I mean, you're slowing everything down to a crawl, you're putting a 200% damage multiplier on everything, and whenever you kill a primed enemy, they will AoE everything around them. It's one of my favorite setups to run with snipers or single shot weapons. It's just really fun. It complements those kinds of weapons really well in my opinion, because number 1, you get some extra AoE from the explosions, which is always nice for single shot weapons, and number 2, since it also slows the enemies down, it makes them much easier to hit and even headshot, which does a ton of damage, especially with single shot rifles or snipers. It's just a really cool build. It works fantastically for solo play, and it's really good in a party setting as well. It just has a little bit of everything. It provides crowd control, it's beefy, and it provides extra damage as well. Moving on to build number 2, which focuses on the other version of Molecular Prime. This one speeds enemies up rather than slowing them down. It's once again using Energy Siphon as its aura for some extra energy, because you're really going to be spamming Molecular Prime with this one. We're then going to use Primed Continuity and Augur Message to increase our duration, so once again the wave expands for longer and thus further, and it also increases the duration of the primed buff. And we're gonna follow that up with Overextended, which is the most important mod here, because it's what kills your power strength and makes the enemies go faster rather than slower. Then, since this is mostly a farming setup, I'm using Thieves' Wit so I can see loot on the minimap even if it's really far away from me, and I'm once again using Primed Flow so I can bank a ton of energy and just spam Molecular Prime. I then slapped on Primed Vigor once again for some extra health and shields, but you can use whatever you want, and I'm using Streamline for a little bit of efficiency. I also decided to slap on natural talent to speed up the casting animation of molecular prime, which makes the build feel much smoother. And finally, I'm using enemy sense. This is a mod that I've added fairly recently and it is absolutely fantastic because what you can do is open up the full map and you can see enemies from miles away, so you can see whether it is worth it to cast molecular prime or when you should cast it and stuff like that. I mean, seriously, if you've never tried enemy sense on a setup like this, give it a shot. It's not like you need a ton of different stats for the setup to work. Now, this setup is designed to do pretty much just the one thing: speedrun defense missions. Whether you just want to finish them as fast as possible, or you're farming credits on something like Akkad, or even farming affinity on something like Hydron. Now, I wouldn't really recommend taking this into like high level missions, so sorties and stuff like that, if your team doesn't know that you're about to do this, because not only are you speeding up the enemy movement speed, you're also speeding up their attack speed and fire rate, so you can get overrun very easily. But if everyone's on board and they are ready for the absolute massacre that's about to happen with enemies zooming around all over the place, go for it, because this will cut the time it takes to do a defense mission by about half. Now, don't be alarmed if it is an amazing right off the bat, because you'll probably have to play around with this a little bit in the beginning to get the timing down, because you want to hit the enemies as they are running in and spawning, because you can very easily cast molecular prime too soon and miss kind of like the second half of the enemies that are just spawning, or cast it too late, at which point the enemies are already there, so you're not saving that much time. You just have to play around with it for a bit and kind of get a feel for each tile set. And finally, we have the Zoom Zoom build, which I've put together after watching Brozyme's Cetus Wisp farming video, which is really good, by the way. If you want to watch it, it's in the comments down below. It's a really fast way of farming Cetus Wisp. It's like 10 times faster than what I did with Vault. Now, I don't know if Brozyme is the one that came up with it, but it is really good. He uses Nova and her wormhole ability to basically jump from one lake to another, so I wanted to make that as efficient as possible. So I'm once again using Energy Siphon to get extra energy so I can just spam wormhole. I also added Rush into my Exodus Slope for some extra sprint speed. Then I have Cunning Drift, Ogre Reach, Overextended and Straight, so that wormhole basically skyrockets you across the entire plains whenever you use it. Then, since there's going to be a bunch of Grenier or Vomvalis during the night around, I'm using Primed Vigor for some extra defense, Streamline and Fleeting Expertise for efficiency so I can spam wormhole, and finally Thieves' Wit, which will mark the Cetus Wisps on your minimap. This is an amazing way of just getting around the plains and farming Cetus Wisps, which are spread really far apart, because if you put a route together and you kind of connect all the bodies of water where the Cetus Wisps can spawn, and then you learn that route, you can clear the entire plains in like 3 minutes. It's not very good for actually, fighting things, but it wasn't designed to be. It was designed to avoid things and just jump from one place to another, and it's really good at that. You can even use it to just speedrun normal missions if that's what you want to do. And there really isn't much else to say about this, it's just a very solid zoom setup. Now, as always, all of these builds will work on regular Nova as well as Nova Prime, though they may require more Forma on the regular Nova. And speaking about Forma, if you're not quite sure how to do it, simply put on all the mods, and if they don't fit, look for the one with the highest capacity drain Forma for that, and do that until all the mods fit. And as always, I thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video and it was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.